That's the microphone going back and forth to me. It's kind of
Again, you're being an activist. I am not.
That's not appropriate, sir.
Who are you with? What's your name?
That's not an appropriate question for you to ask. You're
going to ask how many questions? You get 3?
What a stupid son of a bitch.
Good morning, Liberty lovers, Liberty curious, and anyone else tuning in to Friendly Fire. If you're watching live, then let me especially thank you for tuning in so early. And if you tuned in just a few moments ago, you might have seen us come on the screen because clearly I need to fire the audio video guy. So we'll be dealing with that later. Harsh reprimanding for him. But this show is dedicated to interviewing libertarian candidates running for office, and only libertarian candidates. As the name suggests, candidates will be asked some tough questions. But as a fellow libertarian, I'm not here to make them look foolish or fail. I'm simply raising the bar for interviewing candidates and the expectation for candidates. The Libertarian Party is the 3rd largest political party in the United States and the only viable option to compete with the big 2. And if we're going to compete, then let's do so at all levels, be it candidates, party leaders, and yes, even our podcast. Tracy, how are you doing this morning?
Doing pretty good.
Awesome. So we had that little snafu where I play the little the please wait for friendly fire, and it plays, and I'm supposed to click the button that says loop it, and I didn't loop it, and so then once it's done playing, it just jumps over. Luckily, I had the mic, so they didn't hear you muttering all those terrible things about candidates, or not candidates, but about voters. So you're safe there. They just saw you, and so you look, you're looking good this morning. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And everybody, as you can see, Tracy is here in studio with me. So we are in studio, we are live, and we're going to have a little bit of fun here. Now, I know Tracy personally. I'm the chair of the affiliate here in Jacksonville, and he is a party member. However, I'm going to set those things aside so that we can ask him some tough questions. So let's just get right into it. I did watch your previous podcast, and I don't like to rehash things too much, but kind of tell us just in a couple of, in the fewest words possible, I guess, kind of give us your elevator pitch on what motivated you to run for city council.
What motivated me to run for city council, Mr. Cummings, is the fact that during the first wave of the pandemic, Jacksonville went through a shutdown and went through a phase where when I went down to City Hall to complain about the CDC moratorium that they were implementing in September of 2020 that year, I told them that was going to create a housing shortage that the city had never seen before because of the fact that the people who were working in Jacksonville were told who were essential and who were non-essential. So there was a very big breach of the free market in terms of employment because there should be no way in any place where people should be told what job is essential, non-essential. I mean, anything as petty as wiping down someone's window at the stop sign or at the red light, or something as more sophisticated as being an engineer or whatever. It's all relative because you got to feed your family, you got to put a roof over your head. And any way you prove yourself as useful to the free market, it is essential. And all those little things could have been useful to put people through the pandemic, but their employment opportunities were taken away from them. So they really couldn't pay their rent. They couldn't do things that would keep them above water.
Right.
And so then what the CDC moratorium did, it penalized homeowners and landlords who were giving the service of room and board to these people who were living there, and it told them that you could not evict them unless you had to go through the courts to do so. Now what that did was it put the government in place of a consensual contract between two parties, and it created a third party who had nothing to do with it in the first place. And so that was a big breach there. And so they couldn't pay their mortgage. They couldn't pay for these homes. And they also couldn't pay for the small businesses that they've owned as well, because they used that liquid income in order to pay for those small businesses that kept Jacksonville afloat for so long. And they shut down 120 of those after these homes were foreclosed up to these banks, as far as JP Morgan and Chase, Wells Fargo, Merrill Lynch, things like that. And when they started putting out pandemic money, they end up making billions of dollars based off of those funds from the government by way of the American Rescue Plan and stimulus checks to put it, give it back into the banks. And so they made a lot of revenue, but not net profit, because it was just allocated debt from one area into the next. And that's why I had to pretty much jump into the campaign, because once you created that housing shortage of having these homes getting foreclosed and shut down because people, they weren't paying because they had to kind of set the money to the side for their own personal life and hedge themselves against an economic situation that they've never seen before, that they've never experienced before. So they're trying to keep themselves up above water. And so it put both parties in a very precarious position. And I really wanted to stop that because my grandmother ended up getting her house broken into, because she lives over there on 25th and Moncrief.
Okay.
And that's a very, pretty tough area. I mean, really, let's be real. The central government in the city, they make it tough because really, they're all beautiful people. The city of Jacksonville is the most beautiful people I've ever seen. But when you put people in desperate situations, these things tend to happen. That's where I had to go ahead and step in. And a lot of people who own homes and own real estate, they had to, do things that they wouldn't otherwise have done if the city government wouldn't have stepped in. Such as the CDC moratorium, such as the lockdowns, such as penalizing the private sector or the free market for trying to stay up above water. And those who were unemployed, they would get these unemployment checks, and then, or if they were temporarily furloughed, they'll get these unemployment checks and they're pretty much paid to stay home. But once they try to go out and try to get their selves together and get employed, those things would cease. Even if they would, either they would get the job or not, but it was just, those checks would cease if they were just going for an interview or going for any type of temporary hiring agency to try to get themselves back on their feet. If they didn't get it, well, that's still, bad luck, because that money would cease, and they stopped getting paid. And so it was very hard time. And that's why I had to step in.
Gotcha. Okay. So I listened to your, you were recently on a podcast with the Black Commission, and go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong, but the Black Commission, for anybody that's outside of Jacksonville, it's a local organization that functions within the Black community to increase political action and knowledge. Is that pretty good summary?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So, I heard things in there that I'm kind of hearing here, and that was a lot of knowledge and a lot of data, statistics, facts, things like that. So what I'm curious is, I know that you've been out because you're here in Jacksonville. So I know that you've been out talking to voters. Absolutely. Specifically. You and I went with you and attended your tent at the Melanin Market, Melanin Market, if I can get the words out this morning. I know, right? That recently, that they recently had, and it was like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 or 6 blocks. I mean, it was quite a few blocks. It was a huge event. Market. It was the most vendors that the Melanin Market had during that time. It was about over 200 vendors. Wow, it's a record-setting number. Good. Yeah. That's awesome. And these were vendors of all kinds. They were people that had formal businesses like brick and mortar. Yes. And then there were people that had smaller businesses. Maybe they were running out of their home. And then there were political action committees and, all this other stuff. So there's all these different organizations and groups and businesses there. And you could just basically walk up and down the street, look at it, look to your left, look to your right. Yeah. And there were different vendors all up and down that you could check out. So, so that was great. So my question to you, given all this facts and datas, because you're a politician, at the end of the day, it's all about people. That's right. Is there a story from a voter that you've met, that you met, not like a family member, but a voter that really resonates you, and kind of when you wake up in the morning, that's the person that you remember, that story? Because I always hear stories, but I haven't heard any stories. So tell me a story of somebody that you've met. A story of somebody that I've met that I used to, well, not that I used to know, but someone who I came across from at work. Like I said, my job ended up working through a temp agency in order to get some people on board and try to get some people to come in and work. And these are people that I've seen coming in who come from very well affluent jobs, sophisticated jobs, who've been so affected by the pandemic. Some people have lost, well, this one person has lost their job because of the fact that he didn't have a vaccine. His job ended up having a statute to where, or adapting to a statute to where if you wanted to stay employed, you would have to get a vaccine. And
he didn't want to get one because he had certain medical conditions that would prohibit him from getting that vaccine, a lot of medical complications that he was already going through. And so getting that vaccine would have inflamed those issues. And so, it didn't matter to that job whether he had it or not, or if he had any kind of health complications, they still let him go. And that set him back for a long time. And he went through really almost being homeless and sleeping in his car in order to go from job to job to try to get himself back on without that requirement for employment. And then Indeed.com, there was an uptick of about 91% of jobs that were listed there. You had to have a vaccine as a prerequisite in order to even get into the door for an interview during that time. And that's why during that time, the labor market, as far as labor participation rate, went down drastically. And it wasn't because people didn't want to work. It was because they were prohibited from working because of their own medical freedoms being intruded upon.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the story so let me ask you then further. That was a mandate well, if I remember correctly, there was the concern that there was going to be an actual legal mandate that you had to be vaccinated. Now that actually didn't really come to fruition. I think it did a little bit on the federal level, but a lot of employers were started to kind of jump the gun on that. Right. So in the context of, hey, this is a story that really gets me going as far as becoming a city council member, how do you address that as a city council member? Because it doesn't seem like there's a lot for you to do there.
Well, I disagree.
Okay.
I feel like there's a lot that I can do as far as not only getting information out to voters, but also lifting up these restrictions that the city council is allowing to go into the city of Jacksonville that will prohibit other workers from getting into the market or having to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and gain a significant amount of income for their families. I believe as a city council member, I would definitely not allow these decisions to impede on individual people's success within the free market and having them climb up the ladder in any way, shape, or form. So,
So is that then become not a regulation, but like the occupational licensing? Is that where you're going with that? Talking about like, okay, we've got too many limitations on you as a person, as an individual. So therefore you have a limited means within the market. So you're kind of boxed in, like you take this vaccine in this particular case, or you don't, and you lose your job versus, hey, if we lift some of these, then what it becomes is, hey, you know what? You're right, Mr. Boss. I might get fired for not taking this vaccine, but I've got options.
Exactly. And what it does, it interferes with the market as far as having the options for employment that other people can go to keep themselves going. Because the reason why, for someone with the skills that he had and the experience that he had, there should be no reason for him to have such a hard time getting another job. Right. It was because of that, like I said, the 91% of uptake on Indeed.com or these laboring agencies where you had to have this vaccine in order to work, which was their choice that they took on. But just having that option out there shouldn't have impeded him from having the choices that he would have wanted and going from the next place to the next place. Because when you create that kind of monopoly, it takes away the options people could have in order to work, and it keeps income in Jacksonville from coming in order to hedge ourselves against inflation and other, this pretty much is economic downturn that we're experiencing.
So what kind of things do you think would be helpful to the people that would be in your district, District 8? What kind of things could they look at when they're hearing you talk right now, and they're like, oh yeah, that would be great. I would love to not be boxed into my current employer. What kind of things might those be? What kind of things might they be looking to do in that? And I say that community, I don't mean like the Black community. I mean District 8, the people that you specifically represent. What kind of things?
What kind of things that could help them at that moment?
Yeah. What kind of restrictions might you lift or help impact in a way that makes it so that they, the people living in that district, have options?
Definitely ease up on the gas tax.
Okay.
The excess taxes that we've been under in the city of Jacksonville has crippled people economically to the point where, just like with that gas tax, it's going to be taking $1 billion from the people of Jacksonville in the next 25 to 30 years. And that's a lot of money that we could have used for ourselves in order to have the extra income as far as fuel, as far as food, as far as the essentials that we need on a day-to-day basis, just to survive. Because this past year, because of what they have done, they have decreased our median income value by $3,400, and that's hourly wages and things of that nature. And if you live in a household where there's more families in a household, such as a 2-parent household, where both people are working and they're trying to feed their families, that it doubles in loss. So it shouldn't be to a point where your funds should be accosted for when you have more people compounded in one home in order to build wealth or become a force multiplier and financially pretty much keep yourselves going. And that was, or for example, these property taxes that's going on in Jacksonville, and with the increase in property valuations in Jacksonville because of the inflation, they've been getting much more money as far as millage rate is concerned, and it's taking more money from Jacksonville's pocket annually through those taxations. And that's another inhibition that I would release from the people of Jacksonville. The other is, pretty much, of course, mandates that would impede progress in the market.
Okay. Okay. District 8, for people that don't know, it is I believe it's largely Black community, right? Okay. And the general, I don't want to say rule of thumb, but the general understanding is that Black voters tend to vote Democrat.
Yes.
Okay. And I there was some statistics, and I was like, I don't. Everybody knows it. We don't have to pull out the data and all. Everybody knows that as a rule of thumb, the Black community largely votes Democrat. There is a sizable portion that does vote Republican, and then when you look at the data, they say, it's kind of interesting because a lot of Black voters are actually a little bit more on the conservative side or more moderate. So it seems kind of like a little bit backwards. My question is, you're running as a Libertarian Party candidate, and the Republicans already have a difficult time getting Black voters, okay? At least comparatively speaking.
Right.
And so the Libertarian Party has a very difficult time getting any voters because we're so small. And a lot of times people just don't even know who we are. They don't really, they don't even have a perception necessarily. Like if you say to the average voter, what are Democrats about or what are Republicans about? They probably have an answer. Whether it's 100% accurate or not, they have one. You ask people, what are the Libertarians about? What's the Libertarian Party about? They're a lot of times they don't know, or they'll give an answer and it kind of says, maybe you don't really know, and that's our fault as a party. So what I want to ask is, for the many voters that might be unfamiliar with the Libertarian Party, how do you sway them away from the Democrat Party, right? A party that they know. Right. Even if maybe they may be dissatisfied with it, they at least know who the party is. Right. So how do you get voters to say, you know what? Let's switch it up. Let's go to the Libertarian Party and give this candidate a shot and see if this candidate, makes my life better.
Well,
which I know the candidates don't make your life better, but that's generally the question. Like, do I feel like my life is better after having this candidate in office, or do I not? So how do you get them to give you that opportunity?
You're absolutely right. The candidates themselves don't make anybody's life better. What they do is remove the obstacles from their path in order to make their lives enriching for themselves. Okay. And as a libertarian, the thing about me being a libertarian is I would like to remove government restriction in people's private lives in any way, shape, or form. One of the litmus tests I like to give is that if you're a Republican, you'll have more conservative values. Let's say, for example, do you let's give a good example. Let's say gun rights. Do you want to have let's say religion? Are you a very religious person? Someone would say, yeah, of course I am. Would you like the government to enforce religion in people's lives? And they're like, well, yes, then you'll be Republican. If you're more liberal side or on the Democrat side, if you want to have, let's legalize, let's say gay marriage. It's like, do you want to legalize gay marriage? And they're like, well, yeah. Do you want the government to enforce gay marriage onto the population? They'll say, well, of course, then you'll be a Democrat, And then a libertarian, if you want either one of these things, you don't want the government involved in any way, shape, or form, because what you can do is you could create opportunities for yourself to have that within your community, within your sphere, within your sector, apart from anybody else's established region or established religion or established customs that they already have, because we have the resources, or they would have the resources in order to have it done for themselves. And so that goes for anything, as far as business, as far as religion, as far as everything else you like to imagine. The Libertarian Party gives the people the opportunity to get themselves out of poverty, out of destitution, and into a higher way of living without government interference. Because contrary to popular belief, the government doesn't give anybody anything. It doesn't make money. It doesn't create businesses. It doesn't do any of that stuff. What it does is it creates the winners and the losers. It will disenfranchise the people. Let's say, for example, the racial issue, or just the tragedy of the dichotomies between people. You have black versus white. You have gay versus straight. You have trans versus cis. You have the gun-free zone enthusiasts, and you have the gun enthusiasts. What the government will tend to do is create a disenfranchised people, and then they will tell you that another person is responsible for where your life is, and then it will create that back and forth and that versus between them. And whoever wins out of that, the government will step in and give welfare or privileges to that group. And so, as far as relating it to African Americans, the Democrat Party, what they have done is effectively told us that we are victims and that we have been disparaged for so many years, and that the white man or anybody else is the reason why our lives are the way they are. And for example, I was watching this TV show. I was watching on Atlanta, where a TV show Atlanta that came on FX. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Yeah, it was a real funny show. It was created by Donald Glover. And they had an episode in the third season where they say, okay, what happens if reparations was played out? What would happen? You know, and the thing about reparations, it says that you are, if you if anybody has been, if you have been enslaved, pretty much, if you've been enslaved, or your family, let's say your family has been enslaved, and you're due for compensation, financial compensation for that, even though you know it hasn't happened in hundreds of years, and you're living in the here and now, and there's nobody coming at you or any way, shape, or form inhibiting you from having success. Is because of what happened back then, that you are due compensation at the expense of another group or another people, contrary to the belief or the knowledge that slavery is nothing special to any race or ethnicity, and every ethnicity has enslaved their own ethnicity and other ethnicities as a whole, because it's an economic system that came in before the beginning of time. It's always existed. There was no moral inhibitions when it came to that model until maybe the 19th, 20th centuries, very recently, because it was for political power and political gain. And they politicized it to the point where today it became this abstract concept of oppression into the lives of people today, especially African American people. So what the Democrats have effectively done was use that abstraction to dictate people's lives, and tell them that you are in due compensation for any of these welfare practices that we're going to be giving unto you that will cripple you economically and as a person. But to seem much more egalitarian or free or equal, or economic justice, social justice, things of that nature, we're going to come in and help you. We're going to go ahead and do this for you, pretty much cradle you and baby you and get you back on your feet, which in reality, it does the opposite.
So, okay, that's very interesting, because depending on who you ask, I'm white.
Really?
Depends on who you ask, right? I've had quite a few black folk who are like, no, you seem like you could be a brother. And then I've seen, I've met a lot of white people that are like, yeah, you're not really white. So what are you?
A little questionable.
So I'm kind of in this weird zone, where
ethnic ambiguity.
I got this ethnic ambiguity. And so let's assume that we just look at me and say, yeah, you're basically a white guy. You're passing, as one of the terms that people like to use. So you don't look at me and say, Dio, you're an adversary.
No.
Okay. What if, now I don't espouse any race, any racial ideas, like, negative racial ideas.
Right.
What if I did? Would you consider me an adversary then?
If you had any racial tension towards me?
Even a little bit. No. Why not? Why would that? Because that has been something that's occurred in this country.
Yeah.
And at one point, I think it's hard to argue that that white people were not an adversary. Like clearly in slavery,
Mhm.
right? Because you had a group of people enslaving other people, and
Mhm.
then afterward, there was a long, honest, like real battle to try to get the rights that the Black community, that Black Americans should have had from the very beginning,
Mhm.
right? So now we're now in 2022. So why wouldn't you see me as an adversary if I held on to some of those ideas?
Because it has nothing to do with my personal life whatsoever. There's nothing that you can do that would give you the the arms of power to impede my success in America today.
Okay.
I have all the success, well, all the avenues to success that I have today than anyone has ever had before, prior to me coming in. And the sacrifices that my parents and my grandparents have already made to set myself up today, it has nothing to do with what I can do to go and keep climbing up and continue that tradition on.
Okay.
As far as success is concerned, you being racist towards me would never have mattered. That's fine. That can be a personal thing that you can deal with, and I'll pray for you. And
Right.
but my life is still going to continue. It's still going to go on.
Okay, gotcha. So that takes me to my next question, because here in Jacksonville, we have this issue of Confederate statues.
Mhm.
And for people that are outside of the community, again, we have some statues, some Confederate statues here in Jacksonville.
Mhm.
And the mayor at one point did promise that he would take, I think there was like a select number of like 15 or something, it was like 14 or 15 that were supposed to be taken down.
Mhm.
And this is kind of a big issue right now for a lot of people, because you got a lot of people saying, hey, we should take them down. A lot of people say that we shouldn't. And it tags on to this school issue, which we'll get to in just a moment. It tags on to this school issue where we renamed one school.
Right.
We renamed it from, I always forget the name of it, but we renamed it to Westside High. It was originally
Robert E. Lee High School.
was it Robert E. Lee?
Yeah.
I thought it was a different one name. Okay,
I believe
that might have been it.
I believe it was Lee.
There,
Yeah.
there was one, but and there's others that people are talking about naming, and it
Mhm.
was like $300,000
Yeah.
that it took to rename this school, right?
Mhm.
And so I look at it and I say, well, what are the benefits that we got from it? Because the argument is that that today the Confederate statues, the names of these schools, these schools that are named after Confederate leaders or people that had some racist views, right? That these still impact the Black community, and they're responsible for some of the challenges that the Black community faces. And you say no. So where do you stand on the Confederate statues, since that's currently an issue right now?
I had a conversation with someone about this, even at the Melanin Market,
Mhm.
when I was just out campaigning and telling people what I'm about as far as my campaign goes. And out of everything that I've explained to them, as far as getting ourselves up as a people, up to go ahead and reach economic freedom and prosperity in the ways that I mentioned, none of that even mattered. He wanted to talk about the statues. To him, that was a litmus test. That was a
Okay.
test of whether I would support you or not. I gave these other guys cards of mine to, you have any questions, comments, or concerns about Jacksonville you'd like me to address once I represent you, things of that nature. And
Mhm.
then he looked at me and said, okay, well, how do you feel about the statues? And I said that I'm wildly indifferent about them because of the fact that the dead have nothing to do with my life today. The creator has already decided during that period of time what would happen during that time. That's already been settled. And the North and the South had already went through a period of reconciliation between the two parties
Mhm.
during the conflict of the bloodiest war on American soil. And they've already reconciled, and that's what those statues were built for.
Okay.
Which is funny because the memorial statues and the tradition started in the South, and then it started going out everywhere else as a sign of, like I said, reconciliation and peace between them. They say, okay, cool, we went through this crazy conflict, then let's go ahead and just move on and be together as Americans within this union that was upheld. So I have no qualms with the Confederate statues. And as far as the statues and the flags and any of the memorabilia that we have in Jacksonville and the Southeast period, it never occurred to me that it was a racial thing until really just a few years ago, where it started becoming a big deal. Because for me, for a lot of people, it was just a symbol of the South.
Okay.
That it was just it. It was just Southern pride and Southern, just a thing. It wasn't this sensationalized issue
Okay.
until it took the, really recently the BLM movements and these heightened coalition movements that started bringing in and exciting racial tensions among people, and citing that these images or these statues were a problem. The statue that they're talking about, and that's in question in Springfield, is just a woman reading a book to her kids.
Okay.
Literally, is I believe it's the woman of the Confederacy,
Okay.
and it was just this lady sitting there with her two children. They're reading a book. Wow, that's terrible. You know, I mean, they're just a bunch of chiseled rocks. No
Okay.
rocks have anything to do with my subjugation, especially for the fact that during the Confederacy, there's a lot of African Americans. A lot of African Americans fought into the war on the side of the Confederacy as well, on both sides, in the Union and in the Confederacy. So it wasn't about racial tension during that time. Of course, you had some bigots and racists during that time, but it wasn't to the point where there was just a system in place that would subjugate actively African Americans and separating them from whites. Because in the South, there was a lot of lax, interactions between blacks and whites during that time. It wasn't this crazy black versus white thing this whole time. It excited itself during the Reconstruction era because of the government putting in welfare practices that favored one group over the other. And so that's where those tensions rose up. And I can talk about that stuff another day. But these are the things because of government intervention that create animosity towards groups of people. And when they mention the statues, the only real reason why they want the statues to be removed is because it's an interest of developers that want to come in Jacksonville and build certain things. And they're worried that it'll become an eyesore for other people coming down from out of state or out of the city and to see that. But there's a part of land that's over there in Springfield is very valuable, and they're worried about having that statue there, before they can build.
So you're saying it's outsiders that are actually concerned about statues primarily. I mean, I know there are people here in Jacksonville.
It's a conflict of interest between the builders that want to come in and, establish commerce over here, which is why they want that statue removed. And they're, using this kind of tension of racial tension to say that this is the reason why we want to get these statues removed because of racism, white supremacy. No, it's a conflict of interest between builders that want to come in here.
So you mentioned that you talked to somebody who kind of used that as a litmus test. It was a person at the Melanie Market, so who I assume that was a black person.
Yes.
So what's your feel, at least in your district, of how voters, the people that would be voting for you, what's your feel or your gauge of how they feel about Confederate statues?
Wildly, it's interesting. I speak to people about them and they have no impression of them whatsoever. Commonly, the people I speak to, in the majority, that's in Jacksonville, especially when I'm canvassing and when I'm campaigning and knocking on doors and talking to people, especially in these apartment complexes or even in different gated communities, they would mention it. I would sometimes mention it in passing, and they were like, "What statues?"
Right.
Like, "Oh, what statues? Oh, where? Oh, okay. Well, they're over in Springfield, huh? Oh, that's interesting." And then they would just move on, to other things, especially talking to African Americans. They're worried about many more things that's affecting their lives directly, as opposed to worrying about chiseled rocks.
That's kind of the sense I've gotten, honestly, because, and I've been called a racist for this. Specifically,
I've been called many things,
So, and I've said, like, look, when I talk to Black Americans over time, over the years, and I, and we talk about the issues that they are frustrated about.
Yes,
I don't hear in a natural, organic conversation. I do not hear, if we just didn't have these statues, or if we just rename this school because my child goes to school. And by the way, that school name was Forest High. That was renamed.
Got you.
We got it wrong, but that's okay because I there's like tons of throughout the U.S. there's tons of names and all that of different schools and that have either been on the chopping block for renaming or been renamed. But when I talk to Black folk and I'm like, and I'm not like, wow, what are your problems that you're facing? It's just a normal conversation. You hear somebody talk about things that are important. I don't hear about statues. I hear like police. And police again. Usually that's probably the biggest one that I hear. Or
especially the lack of ways where they can get their small businesses started. All these extra hurdles they have to go through, especially through the pandemic. All these new regulations and these new practices that have them wasting money on their business. That's not having that's not being opened up so that they can make some income and go to the next level. They'll have it shut down because of some ordinance or some extra license that they have to have, or some regulation that they just now put on. I can't really specifically name them now at this time. I'm pretty sure that on my website, Ron Tracy for Jax, I'll have an update about those things and about the economic practices of the Small Business Association, where a lot of the funding by way of the American Rescue Plan that's been going through Jacksonville has not been going to their businesses so they can even get it started, or they could even have a way to continue operating the business during the pandemic when it was at its economic slump, when it was really, really bad for them. So you're right. When I'm speaking to them, those are the things that they're concerned with the most. It's about their families. It's about their everyday lives, about fuel. It's about food. It's about resources and how they can get on. They're not talking about abstract notions of racism. And they and these are guys that are my age and a little bit younger, which is really, I'm really glad we're having a conversation about it, because that's the demographic that really is looking to be excellent, really wanting to excel, to be in business, to be in finance, to be business owners, to just really have a regular family life, just own their own home and not have to worry about restrictions that the city has been placed on, people of melanated hue. And but it's not about schools, not about these statues or any of that stuff, because that has nothing to do with their personal life. If anything, this was interesting. Even though they've renamed these schools, even though they've done all of that, Duval County Public Schools is the district where throughout the whole Sunshine State, where they've had public schools that are listed as in need of the most help because of the underperformance. And so with these changing the schools and how much money that they've spent to change those schools on tax dollars, what has it done? It's done absolutely nothing. So it's completely besides the point.
Gotcha. So let's take a little bit of a moment here. Hope you're enjoying this, everybody that's watching. I hope we're asking the tough questions. I'm seeing some questions in here. In fact, before we move on, real quickly, Dee has asked if you have spoken with Ben Frazier of the Northside Coalition, that he's really big on the statue removal. Have you had any conversations with him?
No, I have not. No, I have not had a direct conversation with Ben Frazier as of yet. I've called the Northside Coalition before, but his sister ended up picking up, and I've called them a couple of times actually. And of course, she says she was gonna, refer our numbers together and get ourselves together, and you were coming back and we get in touch. But it hasn't happened yet. But I understand that Ben is a busy man.
Sure.
Yeah, he's definitely a busy guy. He's all around Jacksonville doing his thing, and so hopefully, when the time comes, I speak to him, I can sit with him, and we can have a constructive conversation about how we could work together in District 8 in order to make good things come about.
Gotcha. Well, let's take a little bit of a moment here. As you know, I've got this new thing, this new segment that I'm doing, and that's where I basically will talk about what people are doing in the Liberty community. So I meant to have these queued up, and unfortunately I didn't. But the idea behind it is I go out on social media and I just ask, I say, hey, what are you doing in the Liberty community today? Like, how have you improved, or what have you done in the Liberty community? And the first time I did it, I got so many responses. I was like, holy wow. So now I'm trying to go through and figure out where this where this was. What I want to try to do is start reading some of these. All right, here we go. How did you contribute to the momentum of Liberty this week? I didn't get nearly as many responses this time around, but I'm going to go ahead and read a couple of them very quickly, and then we're going to move on to the segment of the bill review. So Tommy said that he's continuing his campaign for county commissioner. So good job there. I think that the more libertarians that we get to run for office, the bigger our name becomes, or the more in the minds of people. And so then the question of how do you get voters who generally are voting for Democrat to even consider a libertarian? Like, well, first of all, they got to hear about us and they got to hear some good things. And one of the ways to do it is to get out and run for office.
Absolutely.
So kudos to that. It looks like somebody named Sammy. Some of these are internet names, so you never know how that works out. It says that they had a yard sale without a permit. I didn't even know that you needed a permit to have a yard sale. Now, this is not necessarily Jacksonville. This is just on the internet. So some of these responses can be coming from anywhere in the U.S. They also went fishing without a license. I do know that in general, you need a license to go fishing. And they got halfway through the book, The Creature from Jekyll Isle. So if you really want, when you hear libertarians go on and on about end the Fed, that's a good starting point for you to figure out what in the world are they talking about. And then somebody here, eGhost, that's their name, said they donated to the FPC. So that is the Firearms Policy Coalition. It's an organization that promotes firearm ownership and the deregulation of firearms. That's a good one there. And then I believe that's all I have. Let me check on Facebook here. We'll scroll down here. Oh, yep. I've got one here. So Marcus says he did the same stuff that he does every week. Well, that's a good job. Consistency is key. I worked on stuff for the Libertarian Party of Duval County, for which I am the chair. Absolutely. And Marcus is the vice chair. And he worked on the LPF Candidates Committee. That's the Libertarian Party of Florida. And he did work for Ronald Tracy Robison. I keep wanting to throw an N in there. I apologize. He said, my work is ongoing every day. And it's true. Like the cause of liberty is something that requires daily action. That doesn't mean that you can't take time for yourself. You absolutely should. Do not burn yourself out, but keep working and working hard. And it doesn't matter how big or how small. The little things definitely add up. And you can't be expected to go on and do big things if you don't start out with small things in the first place.
Absolutely.
So kudos to everybody that responded. Kudos for all the work. And for people that maybe just didn't see those posts or maybe meant to come back and post and say, hey, this is what I did. Catch up with me next time that I post it. Just kind of keep your eye out. And when you see it, post it or just send it along. If you're like, you know what, I don't want to wait for them because it's on my mind now. Just find me on social media. You can find me at Liberty Dad, all one word, on Facebook, or Liberty Dad Pod on Twitter. And if you reach out in those ways and just say, hey, DL, here's what I did, great. I'll keep that in mind, and we'll talk about them on the next issue, or the next episode. So, but for now, let's go ahead real quick and play my Just a Bill clip, and then we'll talk about our bill review.
But I know I'll be a law someday, at least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
All right, so let's get back into it here. Making sure my mic is on. We are good, and everything is going proper here, I think. Yep, there we go. Okay, awesome. So we got a bill review now. And I ask each candidate when they come on, I say, tell me about a bill. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a bill that you would necessarily do something about. It's just a bill that you find currently passionate about that you can speak about. And so we're going to talk about that bill. Now, normally what I would do is ask the candidate to give me a bill, and then I would review it ahead of time. Or, it can, maybe it's not a bill, maybe it's a resolution or what have you, anything, any kind of regulation or document that the city has put out. Or government of any kind, let me know. I'll review it. We'll give you a few minutes to talk about it. And then at that point, I would let the candidate go. And then I would go into my own bill review. However, since Tracy is here in person, that would be a little awkward to be like, all right, you go ahead and leave the studio all by yourself, which is my house. So that would be a bit weird. So we're going to do it together. We're just going to kind of walk through it together. And I've got this pulled up here. So it's a referendum here in Jacksonville. So let's go ahead and get this up on the screen here. And let's see here. I believe that's the one. Nope. Let's make it a little bit bigger. All right. Awesome. So we've made it a little bit bigger here. And I'm going to, put this up on the screen so that we can see it. Perfect. All right. So now everybody's got visibility. So this is basically, it's called Keep Our Best Teachers in Duval. And it is a $1 million increase for teacher pay that'll help retain what they're saying is highly effective and experienced teachers. And it will also compensate other staff, such as security personnel, maintenance workers, and meet other operational needs, particularly in art, music, and athletics. So that's kind of like the stated goal on this website that's promoting it. The way that this came up and the way that this works is in Jacksonville, the city council actually does not have any authority over the school system.
That's right.
We have a school board, and what the school board does, though, is they will recommend things like an increase. So they recommended this $1 million increase that they say is needed for Jacksonville. And then they vote on it. And if the vote passes, then that gets kicked over to city council, and then city council will vote on it. And then because city council is responsible for the taxation of
That's right.
of Jacksonville.
Mhm.
So that's how this bill would work. So
Mhm.
let's talk about it. Why did you pick this one?
I picked this one because it is significant to one of the tenets that I'm running on as
Mhm.
far as my campaign is concerned, which is to stop and cease the increase in property taxes on the people of Jacksonville.
Okay.
Because of the fact that we're already going through a housing crisis, we're already going through a loss of median income
Mhm.
in Jacksonville, and it's depleting our target market rate for owning certain homes and having and being a part of a certain echelon to be considered for home ownership. So what this does is, do you want me to go into the deep nitty gritty, or do you want me to say just pretty much
Wherever you
discuss
want to
why?
take this.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, it's significant to that portion of my campaign to stop the increase in property taxes. And the reason why I chose this is because, okay, in April 23rd, they're going to be voting on this.
Mhm.
That's when it's going to go on to the polls, and the people are going to go and give a chance to give their vote, yay or nay.
Right.
The city council had a legal obligation to put this onto the polls for the
Mhm.
people to vote on it, so that they
Yep.
can just go ahead and hike it up without a people's consent, which is nice, because I mean, I wish they would do that with every other bill that they pass,
Right.
in order to appropriate tax income into these big corporations such
Mhm.
as Central, such as the Homes and Suites Hotel, such as all these type of things by way of the Downtown Investment Authority. They always doing these things, such as taking millions and millions of dollars from our taxpayers in order to fund corporations. So I was pretty happy that they were able to let this at least let the people have a choice in it. With that being said, I'm trying to encourage the voters to say, yeah, let's not do this, because contrary to popular belief, the teachers in Duval County they're actually grossly overpaid and not underpaid.
Okay.
Now, out of the almost 400 teachers that end up leaving the Jacksonville, the DCPS, Duval County Public Schools, only about 9 of them cited it was because of teacher pay.
Okay.
Only 9 of them. So it's not an issue of lack of salaries when it comes to teachers. That's a very much so a lie, because and out of 7,000 students that end up leaving, because they also say there's a shortage in students in these schools.
Mhm.
That's because it's not because it was just by happenstance, because the parents took their children out.
Okay.
And that was the reason. That was another reason why. Is because of the fact that Duval County Public Schools have had such a failing rate of return as far as education and the excellence is concerned, in spite of how much money that people are already allocating to this public sector for such a long time. It warrants this as foolish that we should just give more money to an institution that has not been giving proper results. And if it was truly about teacher pay, then they will talk about private school teachers as well, because the private counterparts of public school, they get paid 40 times less on average, as opposed to the public
40
sector.
times less?
Yes, 40 times less. Yeah, and the reason why a lot of parents aren't able to afford to take their children to private schools or some charter schools
Mhm.
or even homeschool, for an example, is because we're already paying for multiple tuitions of children because of our property taxes that we allocate to them already.
Okay.
And the increasing costs with that. Like, for example, my sister, she homeschools her children.
Mhm.
She has to go ahead and gather the resources together to teach her children to, keep a roof over their head and pay the mortgage on that house already, and have her life pretty much going forward. Now, it's already hard enough that if they add this extra millage increase, you have to pay for an extra amount of spending and budget for other children and other students,
Right.
that aren't even hers, whether they graduate or not. It's going to go into that. So I'm really much against paying for extra tuition,
Okay.
basically. And they say that it takes a village, all this type of stuff, in order to keep adding on that egalitarian, trying to pull people's heartstrings about the children, their education.
Mhm.
But private schools, they yield twice the results in academic excellence in charter schools, but yet they're paid grossly less.
Okay. So I've got one of their questions. So they've got this Q&A
Mhm.
portion of their website. And so I pulled it up, and this is like the very first one. It's like, why is the school board asking voters to approve a 1 mil increase in ad valorem taxes? And so it's citing that there's 400 unfilled teacher positions.
Absolutely.
So how do we fill those teacher positions here in Jacksonville if we don't
Mhm.
provide more money? Because if they're unfilled, is, I guess the assumption is that they're unfilled because they don't have the money for them. So what's the plan? And I know this is not like, we're just having a casual conversation. I realize that you're not going to get into city council and then just basically, wave a magic wand of voting and then make all these things happen, because city council is really, it is not in their purview. But that doesn't mean that we can't have a conversation about it.
Absolutely. And like I said, the only reason I'm even mentioning this is because I want to show the people my integrity as a candidate.
Okay.
My integrity as a person that is completely against increasing the taxation on the people of Jacksonville for public sector works that don't yield the results that they're supposed to be yielding with their money.
Right.
Because the thing about public schools, they don't have a proper market force, which would be the consumers, to actually evaluate how much they should be getting paid based off of their expertise and of their the results that they've been given, because it's federally paid. It's been paid by taxation, coercive taxation at that. Contrast to private schools, where it's a direct relationship between parents and teachers, and they pay that way in order to have their child yield the best results of that institution. For public schools, it's the complete opposite, because, like I said, it's public. And I'm completely against giving raises to federal workers just so that they can have a raise. It shouldn't be like that. In any other sector in the world, if you yield the results, you get the raise, then you get the proper pay. But since it's public, there is no proper allocation of funding or evaluation of how much these people should be getting paid based off their performance. Now, as far as the 400 students that are, that left that school and they left those positions vacant, first of all, it should only, this is my belief, as far as we're having a casual conversation about this. It should only be the teachers that go into the institutions who are qualified based off of their work, like I was just saying, who are the best, who represent the best of the best at their position and for their standard, that will be getting these positions, and that will be filling it up. It sounds like it's way too many. 400 teachers. I mean, that's a lot, for teachers to be leaving. And the reason why those 400 teachers have left is because of not pay, but because of exhaustion, because of the improper ratio of students to teachers, disciplinary actions that are way too much for them to handle, and practices within a DCPS that they felt unfavorable. So it wasn't about teacher pay. It was an institutional issue and not a pay issue.
Gotcha. Okay. Cause like I'm reading here and they're saying like they're estimating this would bring in $82 million a year.
Yes.
And it would sunset in 4 years unless it was renewed by voters. And I guess my concern is, when I look at this 82 million, I mean that, in terms of educating our kids, I can understand the argument. Hey, we need money so that our children can have a good education. But tell me where I'm going wrong here. Like if we look back up at this very first one, excuse me, we point out at the very bottom, this last sentence, it really kind of gets me. It says the 1 mil increase is designed to retain experienced teachers. So already I feel like there's a conflict here, right? We're retaining experienced teachers, but we're also talking about 400 unfilled
teacher positions. Exactly.
So which is it? I mean, are we going to retain the experienced teachers, or are we going to fill these unfilled ones? And they're also saying like, hey, they're saying that the pay is too low for the ones that exist. Yeah. Right. And so therefore we need 400 more teachers, presumably at a higher pay. So that presumably they're not going to bring in 400 more and say, well, we're going to keep you at this same low pay that we're already complaining about. Yeah. So I feel like there's a bit of a conflict there. It says compensate other staff, such as security personnel and maintenance workers. Okay, fair enough there. I mean, we want to make sure that people are properly compensated. I get that.
Sorry to stop you, but it's very interesting to want to mention maintenance, because we've already went through a half-cent sales tax increase for the maintenance of public schools around the state of Florida. We've already gone through this tax increase and this hike that has brought in like $1 billion per year. And so that shouldn't even be an issue. If that was the way it's supposed to be, then that should have already been covered with the half-cent sales tax increase.
And then these last few words here, meet other operational needs, particularly in art, music, and athletics. But and I don't have a source to point out, but it seems to me that Duval schools are we are not rated. We're not doing very well in our school ratings.
Right.
But I don't hear anybody saying, if we could just get these art and music and
Mhm.
athletics in a
Mhm.
better position, our
Mhm.
school ratings will go up. No, my understanding is the ratings are down because of standard academic
That's right.
English, math, science.
Mhm.
So why aren't those mentioned here? And I know that's not really a question for you. It's just
Mhm.
when I start looking at this, I'm seeing a request for money, and there's some inconsistencies, I think, on their
Yeah.
own website here.
Mhm.
This is what website is the Duval? I can't see my monitors a bit farther away from here. But
DuvalCBS.com.
yeah, so whoever made this website is in support of the 1 mil increase.
Yes.
But I feel like there are some problems with some of the questions and the answers here.
Mhm.
And when we're talking $82 million a year, like, okay, let's say that we give $82 million a year.
Mhm.
And let's say that we start seeing some better results. Well,
Mhm.
first of all, the biggest question I have is, when do we see these results? Because this is only for 4 years.
Right.
So do we see those results in 4 years so that we can accurately judge? Or are we going to, what it seems like is the usual case, in 4 years, somebody will say, well, we just didn't give enough money. We need more
Mhm.
money because of
Mhm.
all these
Mhm.
problems, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're just going to end up being in this endless cycle of
That's
we
right.
need more money.
That's right.
Because I can't think of a time where somebody came back and said, man, that millage increase
Mhm.
created a boon. Look how great the schools are doing. In fact, we're doing so great that we can actually reduce some of the tax money.
Right.
Like, I don't think I've ever seen that. Maybe it's
Never
happened.
have.
I
I mean, like I said, I'm sure it may have happened, but I've never heard of that. And you're absolutely right. Because once this door opens, it's never going to close again.
Right.
I feel just like with the half-cent sales tax increase. And if they're not going to get it in this way, they're going to do it in other ways
Right.
and ask for more money from the taxpayers in very varied positions in a multifaceted way, so that if one stream of income is not coming from the taxpayers, they're going to get it from somewhere else. And
Right.
if they the next 4 years, when they reevaluate this again, like I said, they're going to say that the approach didn't go the way they planned because of, some issue with something that's of an abstract sense.
Mhm.
It's going to be maybe the climate, or like how they used the pandemic for a lot of the reasons why things weren't going well. Oh, well, because of the pandemic, the supply chain is down because of the pandemic, and the pandemic is the reason why jobs are closing down, as opposed to saying that it was government legislation that caused these problems. It was very concrete decisions that created concrete results. And the same thing with the schools, or the same thing with the naming of the schools. Well, I'm pretty sure the students would increase their performance in school if we just change the name of the schools from
Right.
these racist slave owners, and especially African American kids. They're just underperforming so bad is because they have these names of slave masters on their
Right.
schools, and they're just being oppressed mentally, and they can't see themselves as being successful and raising up. If these black kids don't see themselves as being excellent, it's going to cause a big bad brain hemorrhage where they can't see themselves in higher positions because it's being controlled by slave masters, and it's the spirit of these names. It's ridiculous. There's
Right.
there's no excuse that they'll put out that's going to keep them from asking for more money.
Right. I mean, it feels to me very much, when I observe the situation, that there are legitimate concerns about racism in the world today, right? Like, racism still does exist.
Yeah.
And I think in some cases that it may negatively affect people. Now, I tend to believe that it's, kind of similar to you, that it doesn't largely drive the success or failure of the Black community
Mhm.
as it once did.
Of
Once
course
upon
not.
a time, it did, for sure. I think that the world is different. I think that now we see that what we get is we got a lot of regulations that really hamstring people
Mhm.
and cause them problems. I mean, you might remember several years ago, there was pending regulation for Airbnb owners. And I
Mhm.
read through some of it, and some of it was ridiculously onerous. And I was like, you're going to make it so difficult that people that are just trying to offer an extra room in their house
Exactly.
no longer can do it.
Mhm.
Right. And luckily that got shot down. But I feel
Mhm.
like what we're doing is we're kind of in this loop where we condescend
Mhm.
to the Black community
Mhm.
and we tell them all these terrible things.
Mhm.
And I don't know if the Black community believes it at heart, or I don't know, but it feels to me like we're telling the Black community
Mhm.
this thing, and then we're using that as justification to get more money.
Mhm.
We get more money,
Right.
But then we don't solve the problem.
Exactly.
And then we go back to square one where we say, well, the reason is because of all these forces that are against you, you know, statues, the names of schools, so on and so forth.
That's right.
You know, we've got, like, right now there's this talk in the nation about white supremacy, right? Like I just saw it in the news where they were slamming Republicans for not voting for all of them voted against this amendment that would increase reporting on white supremacy in their like military ranks and police forces and stuff like that, right? And it was called the Snyder Amendment.
Okay.
And it was a very partisan vote. Like every Democrat voted for it, every Republican voted against it. And it just feels like this conversation is kind of getting in everywhere. It's in our education. Like right here, Duval ranks 58th out of 69 districts and last among the 7 large urban districts in years of teaching experience. So, you know, like, is this related to statues? Is this related to the naming of schools? If not, then why aren't we talking? Why are we talking about that instead of what's causing this? Why are we 58th out of number 69? Right? Why aren't we? What is it going to take us to get to 45 and then to 30? And then to 20 and maybe even number 1. What does it take for us to get there? Is it literally just money? Is that really our only answer? It feels like a lazy answer to me.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. And I really believe that if there wasn't such a quasi monopoly on education, then we would have an even more rank in the district as far as experienced teachers are concerned, because they're going to have the proper market forces that I was mentioning earlier to evaluate their experience by way of the productivity that their education would give as far as the success in the students' performance.
Right. So I'm to understand that there's is there a protest on this bill?
Actually, I'm putting together a rally on July 30th.
July 30th?
Yes, July 30th. July 30th. Yeah, this morning is crazy with the words. But
Yeah,
I'm putting together a rally.
It's the coffee.
It's got to be. But I'm putting together a rally on July 30th in order to bring the word out about this this referendum that's come out, because it's a preview into what's going to be happening in Jacksonville and Duval County as a whole in the future.
Right.
That we have to be aware of when we're going to the polls and we're voting yes on these referendums. That's going to be taking more money from Duval taxpayers and putting us into more economically desperate situations, you know, under the guise of better teacher pay, better this and better that. Well, we all know that throwing money at something simply because, you know, thinking it's going to make it better, it doesn't make it any better. Because there's no way we should be compensating anything or anybody based off of market failure or underperformance. There should be an intrinsic change in the way the system is ran so that it would yield more results. Like I said, instead of having the people pay so much money every year by way of their property taxes to pay for these schools, we should definitely leave them to the market as a whole and see where their true evaluation stands.
Okay. So July 30th, where's that going to be?
We're working on a location. I don't want to disclose that here right now.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but when everything,
so you're going to want to keep your eyes peeled, folks. And so let's start wrapping this up. Where can people find you? And then when they find you, that's where they're going to, I presume that's where they're going to hear about where this rally is going to be, right? So, so let's close in, give your final words to the folks that are watching and that will be watching in the future, and let them know where they can find you and how they can find out information about where you're going to be.
Absolutely. My name is Ronald Tracy Robison. I'm running for City Council in District 8. And the tenets I'm running for, as far as my campaign is concerned, is to abolish further gas tax, abolish further property tax, to shave down Jacksonville's overall debts. Because a lot of people don't know that Jacksonville is under $3 billion worth of debt. And as taxpayers, we have to take on the tax burden of $10,200 each in order to pay that debt off. That's not including the recent amounts of taxation and an increase or actually a decrease in our median income that has been included because of these inflationary practices, and also to stop corporate bailouts and to stop corporate welfare, which is another reason why this referendum is very important to me. Even though I am a city council candidate and I have no control over this, there are other candidates running for school board who are much more suited to tackle this issue, and as opposed to myself. But it's to bring the integrity of myself, who is a candidate, to fulfill the promise of not furthering the property tax of my constituents, that I wanted to mention this and give you all a overview of these referendums that they're passing for you to sign off and get, so you can have a better grid to put things in the proper perspective when you go to the polls and make that decision, because they're not going to do it for you. It's going to be under the guise of egalitarianism, of equality, or of some abstract betterment of humanity, quote unquote. But once you look at the stats, data, and statistics that comes with these referendums that I will offer to you as a candidate, we can all make a better decision. You can find me on rontracyforjax.com. I have videos and I have articles detailing these things that I've been speaking on this podcast with Liberty Dad. Now, I'm also very happy and grateful that he invited me on to here. You can catch me on Facebook, Ronald Tracy for Jacksonville City Council. Go to the Facebook search and type in RTR number 4 and CC. My page will come up. And yeah, you can find me right there.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I hope the questions were not too difficult. My goal is to make it a little on the interesting side and kind of push back a little bit, but I'm not here to be hostile. Right. Us libertarians already have a tendency to be hostile toward each other. So we don't need another podcast of hostility, but we do want to ask them tough questions. We want to make sure that we are, as the internet says, we're sending our best. Absolutely. So that's what we're trying to do. We want to send our best so the voters get our best. So make sure you look up Ronald Tracy Robison on Facebook and find out where he's going to be. I know that you hold different events. You go out to different events. You keep up pretty well on Facebook. So if you want to know what he's doing, and then your website one more time.
The website is rontracyforjax.com. It's spelled RONTRACY number 4 JAX.com.
All right. And if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, ding dong, however that works. And so that you can be alerted when I have new videos and new candidates coming out.
And also, before you close out, I want to mention that on my website and on Facebook itself, I'm slated to do much more pothole filling. I remember for a while we were going ahead and filling potholes. It's been about a couple of months since I last filled a pothole, because just adjusting to the campaign and also trying to get campaign funds. If you'd like to have us go ahead and fill up more potholes in the city of Jacksonville, because there was a lot of work that needs to be done in the city that I want to go back into again in order to correct. I remember there was a segment about what you're doing for Liberty on a day-to-day basis. That was part of the campaign that I'm running on, Make the Activism My Campaign. We went out and we had myself, there was a team of other people who went out just fixing potholes around the city, as opposed to having cars get totaled and get really wrecked because of the inaction of what the city has done. Even though they're taking tax money from us as a people in District 8, it's very important that we use these free market solutions and take human action when we are tackling the economic destitution that we're facing. And it's about having people voluntarily go out there and be the custodians of their city and of their community that they want to see. Go out there, we fix the potholes ourselves, we do these things ourselves, and you're going to get updates based on that as well. And I would like to have volunteers to come and sign up for the team of Ron Tracy for Jax, and we can do many, many good things as far as feed the hungry, filling potholes, and going out canvassing and doing other media events. So like I said, Ron Tracy for Jax and Ronald Tracy Robison for Jacksonville City Council on my Facebook page. You will get updates on those as soon as possible. The page is picking up, and the followers are coming in, and the content on my end is coming out just as frequently. And I have a lot of things planned, and I hope to see you all then.
Awesome. So not just another empty suit telling you what he's going to do, but a man of action, getting out there, talking the talk and walking the walk. So make sure you give this man a follow and reach out to him. And with that, always remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your product is people. You know what? I messed that up. But have a good week.
Oh, man.